Going into this video, I am well aware of the fact that whether Infinity Ward do anything that I suggest, or do absolutely none of it, Modern Warfare 2 2022 will be a massive financial and commercial success. However, when you're not just giving your game the same name as one of the most iconic shooters that reality itself has ever bore witness to, but are also having it act as the modern era's version of that game, financial and commercial success aren't the be-all end-alls. When you're carrying a legacy like that, you have a responsibility to both honour and respect what made the original so good, and to ensure that those strengths remain intact. The original Modern Warfare 2 was a turning point for Call of Duty. Prior to it, the two previous entries in the new era of Call of Duty that started with COD 4 and World at War, tried to be rather grounded games, and a lot of the time they were rather grounded. They weren't hyper-tactical, squad-based military simulations by any means, but their overall tones, set pieces, narratives, weapons, characters, etc. tried to at least keep one foot in reality. But with Modern Warfare 2, that all changed. Where COD 4 was Black Hawk Down and World at War was Saving Private Ryan, Modern Warfare 2 was a Michael Bay movie. Senses of realism and that grounded atmosphere that COD 4 and World at War tried to keep were swapped out for Bond villains, Hollywood set pieces, and Michael Bay explosions. This is where Call of Duty started to take on its new identity of balls to the wall, over-the-top action. Something that trickled down into all facets of the game. Story, characters, set pieces, music, weapons, kill streaks, and more. Modern Warfare 2's entire identity is that insane Hollywood action movie direction that it took the franchise in. And I think that is one of the most important traits that Modern Warfare 2 2022 needs to try and uphold. It needs to have that movie-like atmosphere to it. Modern Warfare 2 was filled to the brim with iconic movie references and callbacks in its campaign, in multiplayer, and even in the weapons sandbox, but it managed to make all of them feel like its own. Never did these callbacks or references ever feel contrived or out of place. Rather, they only helped to bolster that overly badass atmosphere that the game was trying so hard to achieve, and to help craft its identity as an almost video game homage to action movie history. Now, based on what little bits of information that we have about this game so far, primarily from the small bits of official information and also from some of the leaks, it appears as though Denis Villeneuve's Sicario is going to be acting as a major inspiration for this year's Modern Warfare 2, with much of the story being focused on Task Force 141, taking out drug cartels, something that I am really excited to see. Both Sicario movies are fantastic, but the first Sicario in particular is nothing short of a work of art in its cinematography, story, music, sound design, characters, and combat. Easily one of my top 5 favourite movies of all time, and if that's going to be acting as the inspiration for Modern Warfare 2's kind of movie-like atmosphere, then I think we're in for a fun ride. It's the perfect candidate for it as well. Sicario did have some of the more bombastic Hollywood explosions and action segments that inspired Modern Warfare 2 all those years ago, but at the same time, it felt incredibly grounded and realistic. The plot points were believable, as horrific as some of them were, and the firefight scenes all looked, sounded, and played out exactly how you'd expect a Spec Ops team to operate in those operations in real life, down to even the most minute of details. With Modern Warfare 2019, it was clear that Infinity Ward wanted to take a more serious approach to telling a Call of Duty war story. There was no train go boom or any ridiculous train catastrophe scenes. It felt incredibly grounded, a great translation in fact of COD 4's foundations into a more modern tactical experience. Now, to act as both a great sequel to Modern Warfare 2019 and all the themes that it set up, and also to honour the legacy of its forefather, Modern Warfare 2 2022 needs to blend both that realistic atmosphere with the more bombastic notes of the OG Modern Warfare 2. And using Sicario to act as both its tonal and atmospheric North Star is just about the best way to do that in my books. But there's more to it than just tone and atmosphere. One of Modern Warfare 2's most iconic elements was its story's twists and turns. The prisoner turning out to be Captain Price, Shepard's betrayal and the death of Ghost, the invasion of Washington, the final battle with Shepard, and more. Now, this year's Modern Warfare 2 is telling a completely different story to the Modern Warfare 2 of old, so of course I don't expect to really see any of these moments recreated one-to-one in a modern capacity. However, I do think that their lifeblood needs to be carried forward. But you know what, despite saying that, now that we've actually seen some campaign gameplay, it looks as though the mission that we saw was something of a combination of The Only Easy Day Was Yesterday from Modern Warfare 2 and Crew Expendable from COD 4, so maybe I'm wrong in that. Maybe we will see some one-to-one recreations of elements of both Modern Warfare 2's campaign and, hell, maybe even COD 4's as well. Modern Warfare 2's story was notoriously dramatic, again, harkening back to its more Hollywood-esque roots, and I truly think that for this year's Modern Warfare 2 to follow adequately in its footsteps, it needs to tell a similar kind of story. Infinity Ward have already announced that there's no Russian kind of mission in the campaign, which, honestly, I see some people not liking this. I'm personally fine with this. As big of a shocker as no Russian was in Modern Warfare 2 back in the day, that mission only worked because it was necessary for the overall story. What I wouldn't want them to do is to add something like it again that doesn't fit in the story. It's just added for pure shock value and kind of nostalgia as well, with no degree of substance or meaning in the overall story. I think nowadays actually quite a lot of franchises fall into that trap of adding things in particular for nostalgia purpose that end up feeling rather substance lacking because the only reason they're there is for nostalgia, not because they fit into the overall story. Nostalgia is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. I think that it can be used in some really interesting ways, and I think games out there have used it in really interesting ways in the past. But a lot of the time, it just ends up feeling fanservice-y and cheap and kind of out of place, so I don't want to see this game try and do that too much. When it comes to crafting that super dramatic experience, of course, music is a massive deal as well, and to say that this year's Modern Warfare 2 has some rather large boots to fill in regards to music might just be the understatement of the century. Modern Warfare 2's campaign gets the blood pumping like almost no other COD campaign can manage, and the fact that its soundtrack was helmed by none other than Hans fucking Zimmer is probably one of the main reasons for that. Also, massive credit as well to Lorne Balfe, who continued Hans Zimmer's themes throughout the rest of the soundtrack. Modern Warfare 2's soundtrack had a fantastic main theme, which was done by Hans Zimmer, iconic still to this day, and then it also had a bunch of really unique and bombastic themes for each faction, which gave them this unique and memorable identity. But then also, there were the quieter pieces that invoked feelings of espionage and helped to build tension. And to this day, Modern Warfare 2's soundtrack is easily the most memorable of all of the Call of Duties. And I say that as a massive World at War fanboy who loves that game more than almost any other game in existence. Despite that, I still think Modern Warfare 2 has the best Call of Duty soundtrack. Now, I'm not going into Modern Warfare 2 expecting anything really on the level of Hans Zimmer's main theme for the original, but I do have a feeling that this game's soundtrack will be excellent, considering that Sarah Schachner, who did the soundtrack for not just Infinite Warfare, but Modern Warfare 2019, is returning to work on Modern Warfare 2. Her work on Modern Warfare was absolutely fantastic. It fit the modern and realistic theme of the game really well and was honestly pretty memorable. Elements of it even sounded like they took some notes from Johan Johansson's work on Sicario as well, which is very fitting, I'd say. But of course, campaign is only one facet of the experience. The original Modern Warfare 2 had really three main components to it, with the second component being almost an extension of the campaign: Spec Ops. Since the introduction of zombies in World at War, every Call of Duty's had to have some sort of PvE-esque third mode, and Spec Ops was Infinity Ward's first take on that. Now, Spec Ops wasn't anything spectacular by any means. It was definitely nowhere near as innovative or unique as Zombies was, but realistically, none of that matters because of how replayable and fun it was. Spec Ops took certain set pieces, encounters, and scenarios from the campaign and modified them slightly to act as small, repeatable missions that could be played in co-op, and that also had a rating score system. These levels managed to perfectly recapture the essence of what made the campaign so fucking awesome and badass, and bottle it up into a series of hyper-replayable experiences that never seem to get old. That bottling up of the campaign experience is Spec Ops, and that's what Modern Warfare 2 Spec Ops needs to try and recapture. Modern Warfare 2019 brought Spec Ops back, but to say it was bastardized is quite the understatement. It took the foundations of the original Spec Ops mode, its missions, but it tried to reinvent how they played, turning them into like an almost pseudo-raid mode that was set on the, at the time, unreleased Warzone map Verdansk. It tried to be semi-open world at the same time as trying to have essences of the classic Spec Ops. It didn't work. This mode, quite frankly, was garbage. The AI felt either way too difficult or way too easy, the maps were way too big, the objectives were frankly dull and uninteresting, and none of the missions had any identity. And for Modern Warfare 2, this absolutely needs to change, because Modern Warfare 2 Spec Ops was the polar opposite of everything I just said. And thankfully, in that regard, it seems as though we're in luck. Speaking to GameSpot, Infinity Ward have said that Modern Warfare 2 2022's take on Spec Ops will be more comparable to an enhancement of 2009 Spec Ops.
Your work is appreciated. Well done.
The official description of the mode right now is a tactical co-op mode that advances your team building skills and also sets the scene for near endless hours of gameplay available in the world-class multiplayer. Which to me sounds quite a lot like the Spec Ops of yore. Now, of course, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully they don't try and reinvent the wheel here again, because honestly, classic Spec Ops was precisely what it needed to be. Some things don't need extreme innovation or reinvention with every title. They're perfectly fine as they are, and I really hope that Infinity Ward sees that with Spec Ops in Modern Warfare 2. There is one thing though, if you dare to bring back classic Modern Warfare 2 Spec Ops without a snowy stealth sniping mission, then to say you've dropped the ball would be quite the understatement. That is a necessary requirement.
Nicely done.
The arcadey nature of Spec Ops was not only a big aspect of that mode, but it was also something that ran through the veins of other elements of classic Modern Warfare 2 as well. In particular, the most important element: multiplayer. Now, traditional Call of Duty multiplayer isn't as big nor as important nowadays as it was back in 2009, primarily thanks to Warzone, which I'm not going to talk about in this video because it's a whole different beast. That said though, it is still very important, especially given that this game is Modern Warfare 2. Modern Warfare 2's multiplayer was a defining moment for the entire franchise, and is the primary reason that so many people fell in love with not just this game, but this entire series. It managed to translate so many of the themes from campaign over to a PvP scenario perfectly, bringing its bombastic, Hollywood-esque atmosphere over to a more dynamic setting that was infinitely more replayable. Where COD 4's multiplayer tried to retain that grounded feel with its weapon sandbox, attachments, perks, and kill streaks, Modern Warfare 2 did the complete opposite. Keeping weapons and their usability grounded was swapped out for pure badass fun factor, which I think is what gave Modern Warfare 2's multiplayer so much of its identity. It took that balls-to-the-wall campaign philosophy and applied it to every facet of multiplayer. Balance be damned. Don't get me wrong, Call of Duty has never been a bastion of balance at all, but goddamn, Modern Warfare 2 was on a whole different level. The UMP silencer, the ACR, the pre-patch Model 1887s, one-man army noob tubes, Harrier strikes, chopper gunners. Almost nothing in this game is balanced, which I think is why it was so fun. I feel like modern Call of Duties tend to fall into the trap of having one, maybe two, or if you're very lucky, three meta weapons that just dominate the entire sandbox, with everything else feeling noticeably weaker, and with those meta weapons completely cycling in and out with major seasonal updates. Whereas in Modern Warfare 2, just about everything was really damn powerful, and if it wasn't, it was still somehow really fun to use anyway. Take for example the Akimbo P90s, which I somehow managed to get a nuke with the other day. These things are god awful, and yet still they're so damn fun to use. The actual design and ideas behind the weapons played into this fun factor as well. Having things as ridiculous yet as cool as the alien-inspired neo-sci-fi heartbeat sensors on the side of your gun. Having the Terminator 2-inspired Akimbo Model 1887s, or the ability to dual-wield P90s for example, slap an underslung shotgun onto your assault rifle, or insta-kill people with throwing knives. There was a clear enforcement of the rule of cool with this game, and that needs to be a primary philosophy for this year's Modern Warfare 2 as well. Don't get me wrong, there were definitely elements of this rule of cool in Modern Warfare 2019's multiplayer, but a lot of the times the multiplayer in that game felt like it was trying too hard to be realistic and almost heavy. It felt similar to the original COD 4, like it was at times holding itself back to try and uphold that grounded identity. But for Modern Warfare 2, I'm hoping they kind of loosen up a little bit and kind of let that grounded realistic identity slip for multiplayer. A small issue that I had with Modern Warfare 2019's multiplayer that Modern Warfare 2 absolutely did not experience in any way, shape or form was how heavy things could feel at times. Now, Call of Duty to me has always been a very quick, snappy, semi-arcadey shooter, and Modern Warfare 2 was the absolute epitome of that, but sometimes I think the animations in particular in Modern Warfare just felt a bit too much like they were trying to imitate that Battlefield or Rainbow Six Siege realistic feeling. This was even the case for me when I used guns with attachments on them to make them more snappy. I don't know, maybe that was just me, but I do hope that this year's Modern Warfare 2 sees a little bit of a pivot back towards that style of gameplay. Call of Duty has never been a hyper-realistic military sim shooter. It's always lent far more towards that arcadey feel, and although it's definitely dipping its toes in that realism factor now, which to a degree I do really like, I do want to see them move towards the arcadey factor a bit more with this game. Now, I've tried not to hone in too much on specifics in this video and rather focus more on the broader, more universal features and themes from the classic Modern Warfare 2 that I want to see brought into the modern day with this year's Modern Warfare 2. However, there are a few specific things that I really want to see come back from classic Modern Warfare 2, so you gotta give me a few minutes here just to nitpick and to talk about those, because I can't help but do it. Firstly, the Akimbo Model 1887s complete with their animations from Modern Warfare 2 1-to-1. See, I grew up watching Terminator 2, and so being able to run around with not one, but two Winchester 1887s firing and chambering shells just like Arnie does on the Harley in that movie was such a fucking power trip, and I guarantee it was for many others as well. This is one of those movie references that the game really made feel like its own and that helped to build that Hollywood-esque atmosphere. For me, out of the kind of Modern Warfare 2 iconic gun lineup, with like the ACR, the UMP, the Intervention, etc., the models have always been ranked number one. They're my favourite weapon in the entire game, some of my favourites in the entire franchise, and I feel like if you're gonna make a Modern Warfare 2, you can't make it and not have the Akimbo 1887s restored in their original fashion. You've got to have them there with the swing animations. You just can't. They've got to be there. Secondly, the prestige system. They tried a different kind of like ultimate progression system in Modern Warfare 2019, but it just didn't hit the same as prestiging did, and I really hope for Modern Warfare 2 they bring back that classic system 1-to-1. I don't really have much to say on this, to be quite honest with you. I just really want to see the classic prestige system come back, and to be honest, I think if any game is going to be perfect to bring it back, it's Modern Warfare 2. Modern Warfare 2 2022 has some massive boots to fill, and to do so, it needs to find a way to embody that classic Modern Warfare 2 spirit of bombastic, over-the-top Hollywood action, while simultaneously crafting its own identity and following in the footsteps of Modern Warfare 2019. Can it manage it? Honestly, I genuinely don't know. Modern Warfare 2 is the Call of Duty franchise equivalent to Halo 3 in terms of the size of the boots that it needs to fill. And so far, I'm going to be honest, I've been a little bit underwhelmed. All of the marketing material they've shown off so far, in particular the reveal trailer and the campaign gameplay, didn't get me that hyped. Nowhere near as hyped as Modern Warfare 2019's trailers got me. Don't get me wrong, they weren't bad by any means, but it just kind of felt like they were missing something. I don't know, I didn't get that immediate feeling of excitement that, for better or worse, Call of Duty trailers are normally excellent at inducing into me and many others, and I've actually seen quite a few other people saying the same thing, but who knows? I guess time will tell. So those are my thoughts on Modern Warfare 2 2022 and the incredibly iconic and large boots that it has to fill. It's going to be an interesting one to revisit. I'm definitely going to revisit this video later on in the year when the game comes out to see if the game did in fact manage to fill the boots. So if you want to see if it does, then make sure you hit sub and also ring the old bell button as well. You don't want to miss that video when it comes out. And so, with that said, I'm going to round this one out here. I want to give a massive thank you to my amazing patrons for the continued support over there as per usual. Thank you so much. And thank you all so much as well for watching yet another branch out video, especially if you made it this far. I appreciate you so much. Thank you very much. And I'll catch you all in the next one.